So, did you have to watch this episode, or was it a free choice? Was it already determined, or did you have some choice in the matter? This is the question in this episode we will be grappling with: determinism versus free will. Two well-known atheists, Alex and Stephen, support determinism as a very strong and convincing argument. And I would like to suggest that it may not be as solid of an argument as they believe it is. Now, I'd like to start off by saying these are two very smart guys, way smarter than me, who seem like honest searchers for truth. They are thoughtful as well as sincere in their conduct towards others. It is very encouraging to see the kind of response and viewership they receive for these kinds of topics. To see that so many people care about these things is quite amazing and unbelievable. I remember my philosophy class professor in college making the comment that there were two kinds of jobs you could get with a philosophy degree: a barista at Starbucks or a professor at a college. He said he wanted the first but had to settle with the latter. We thought this was hilarious because it was so true. Who knew that probably right then was developing a new world where philosophers could communicate ideas and have interactions with people all over the world, and that there would be lots of people interested in watching this? Crazy. Now, back to the topic at hand. While I disagree with their worldview and beliefs on certain issues, I'm not here to bash anyone or mock anyone. The view that they express concerning determinism is a common one, currently popularized by Sam Harris. I wish to address it and my objections to the belief of determinism. I'm not here to slander anyone and would ask that all comments be civil and respectful, especially if you are a Christian. You bear the name of Christ, and you better act the part. I'm fine with people attacking me, but please be kind to those I disagree with. Thank you. First off, I would like the position of determinism to be explained by the promoters of it, to give a good and hopefully strong understanding of determinism, and be as fair as possible. I wish I could have more time to go through everything, but video time is limited and I will try my best. The link for their whole conversation is in the description box. Without further ado, though, let's hear the opening statement of belief from these two philosophers, Alex O'Connor and Stephen Woodford.
I think it's worth, I suppose, briefly explaining explaining the argument. I don't know the best way of going about it.
Sure. So there's on page 5. There's a good way of summing it up. So I'll just quickly find it. Should have found it beforehand. So just a small sentence. Free will is an illusion. Our wills are simply not of our own making. Thoughts and intentions emerge from background causes of which we are unaware and over which we exert no conscious control. We do not have freedom in the way that we think we do. So that's essentially his thesis. That's the point that he's making across. And it's something that I entirely accept. It's basically, if you do not choose whatever components or whatever deterministic factors make you make a decision, then where's the freedom in it?
Yes.
Gentlemen, you have certainly displayed before me a powerful adversary, seemingly impenetrable, whose strength could have given me a great deal of trouble, were it not for the fact that I chose to think about the problem from several different sides. But before I begin explaining my objections, let me first address your brief points that religion stands in the way of determinism and its incompatibility with it.
But the problem is, and I hate to have to say it because it always seems to come back to this, but I don't like to bring this in where it's not necessary, because atheists are often accused of doing this, but religion is, it stands in the way.
Of course it is.
You cannot be religious, believing in free will in the sense that they do, but also accept determinism and by extension the practical implications.
No, completely. That's
so
completely the case.
All put together, what we need to do is we need to firstly keep up the discussion about theistic philosophy,
First off, the debate between determinism and free will has gone on for a very long time, at least generally going back to Plato and Aristotle, if not further. This isn't some new idea that is going to blow religion away. It's an old conversation that has been around long before our time and will continue long after anyone listening right now is buried and dead. This is simply incorrect that determinism's acceptance is slowed down and hindered by religion. For instance, some Christians believe in determinism. If you're a staunch Calvinist, it's no issue at all. And there have been many other religious groups throughout the millennia that have believed in it. The argument over free will versus determinism is nothing new. Now, before I begin my argument, I must first define my terms. What do I mean by the words free, determined, and will? The word free means not under control of another. The opposite of free is domination or determined, which means complete control over another. What does will mean? The mental powers manifested as wishing, choosing, desiring, or intending. The determinist argument, as stated earlier, is this: things conscious and unconscious, internal and external, lead to the choices we make. Genes, what kind of family that raised you, your environment, indigestion, the lack of sleep, that mean words someone just said to you, your pencil that just dropped to the floor, that time you left baked beans in the back of your car and spilled it all over the floor but didn't know about it for a week, and the hot summer sun just kind of baked it in, and it smelled so terrible, but you were in a rush to get to church, so you had to clean it out without barfing while trying to also watch your baby and, well, you get the picture, etc., etc. What? Could have happened to anybody. Okay, yeah, I did it one time, but tell my wife it wasn't my fault, right? I was already predetermined to do it. I had no choice at all in the matter. As I was saying, our choices, are determined for us, and we don't have free will. We make the choices we make because of those many myriad of pre-causes. And also, if we could see all the things conscious or unconscious and external causes that will contribute to a given action or choice, we, the observers, could predict your choice. Therefore, once again, the argument therefore holds that everything you do is determined. Seems pretty solid of an argument. A real juggernaut of an argument. But may I ask a question? How determined are things really? Are there things that are more determined than other things? For example, is a domino more dominated in its will by cause and effect than a dog? Or maybe we should word it another way. Do dominoes have fewer choices than a dog when affected by a flick? If the answer is yes, then the term for less dominated or determined is what we call or describe as free or freer. The words free and determined simply describe what the other is lacking. They're antonyms of each other. You can't know of one without the other. Both are needed to exist in order to understand what they individually mean. Therefore, determinism cannot exist without the other existing as well. So if we therefore call the dog more free than the domino, the dog then has a measure of freer will than the domino, and thus proving there is free will because of the difference in determinism between the two. From this understanding of reality, we can conclude that freedom and determinism function on a continuum between the two polar opposite extremes of completely free and completely determined, or as it is called, hard determinism. This view of free will and determinism more accurately expresses the nuances we account for with our observation of reality. Hard determinism in the universe, they agree, doesn't absolutely exist. And later in the video, they do agree that some things in the universe have free will.
But there is the whole thing is based upon the assumption that free will doesn't exist, which we both agree on. But there was, I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but before I was convinced by this book, I was somewhat on the fence. And the reason I was on the fence was because I hadn't fully looked into it, but I thought in my head, what about quantum physics?
Yes.
And you see where I'm going with this, in the sense that there's the point to be made that a lot of people think that randomness, true randomness, exists in the quantum realm. And if true randomness can exist, that means everything isn't determined. And so does that not leave some leeway for free will? And obviously I think we agree on this, but how would you respond to
I
that?
think it does two things that are very important. First of all, you could legitimately say that determinism is false. The idea that all things are determined is false.
Yes.
But people would then think, as they've said, oh, there are quantum fluctuations, or however they want to call it, therefore free will exists.
Like
that's the problem.
Michio Kaku.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect example. So, but that's the problem. It's not the case. So you might be able to say, okay, hard determinism, the idea that everything is determined, is, so far as the evidence currently shows, that is actually false when you get to the quantum level. But how does that give you free will?
Exactly, yes.
You know, like, your will could either be the product, and it's probably both. It's the product of things that you didn't choose and of pure randomness.
Yeah.
Neither of those give you free will.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like a red herring.
Yes. It's a way of sort of avoiding the question. It's like, look, I experience free will. I don't like the idea that it doesn't exist. All the evidence points to it not existing. So, quantum physics, people don't know much about that. Maybe something lies in there that has my answer. I'm just going to buy into that. But even if quantum physics did prove that there was randomness in the universe, like you say, it holds no bearing. It rebuts determinism.
Sure, it rebuts determinism.
But
there's a reason why he doesn't use that word
quite
as often
in the book.
as
I don't think he uses
opponents.
the word as in for himself.
I reread half of it today, and I haven't read it once. And there's a reason for that. And it's because, as he put in the quote that I mentioned at the beginning, whether it's randomness or determinism, you don't get what we've always called free will.
That doesn't matter. What matters is if you have control over it or not.
Now, if we go back to our continuum of completely or totally free will on one end and completely or totally determined will on the other end, we can define the two extremes as such. Total free will is a will that is unhindered, unrestrained, and uninfluenced by anything. Total determined will is a will completely restrained and completely controlled in every way. Total free will would require someone or something to be so powerful in will that it would be God. A will completely unhindered and irresistible to anything is completely impossible to comprehend, and I don't believe anyone actually thinks that they have that. This seems to be the will the gentlemen are saying they're proving doesn't exist in humans, which, yes, that is obvious that humans do not possess that powerful of a will. Totally determined will would require something to be so controlled that it was completely mastered into complete submission. This would require some type of original cause, unaffected by anything, that was so powerful that it could control something else in every single aspect. Therefore, to accomplish this extreme, it would require something with total free will to be so powerful in its will that it could cause such total determinism on another thing. So, as you can see, you cannot have one without the other. There is no total determinism without the existence of total freedom, and also all the degrees of variance of these wills in between the two ends of the spectrum. Now, how does this apply to us humans? Well, we each individually vary in the degree of freedom or control that we possess over our wills as humans. We are more free than a domino or a tree or a chipmunk. We do not possess total free wills nor total determined wills. We are somewhere on the spectrum, and each one of us differs in degree of freeness and determination. There is also another conclusion to make note of concerning total free will and total determined will. If you want total determinism to exist, then this requires something with total free will to exert that kind of absolute control onto something else. Otherwise, you can't have anything totally determined. If you can't have anything totally determined, then you have to say there is some measure of freedom in everything as well. The minute something can become totally determined is the minute something has total free will to exert that kind of complete determinism. So therefore, either determinism or free will proves there is some measure of free will in existence and some measure of determinism. You can't have a world in which one exists without the other. It's a contradiction. This explains why, probably, this argument has gone on for so long. It consists of the libertarian or total free will camp on one side of the coin, arguing with the determinist camp on the other side of the coin, and not realizing they are both two sides on the same coin. They both exist and interact with one another. You may be saying, well, what does any of this matter? It's just a fun thought game people are playing. No big deal. Yeah, you're wrong though. That would be true except for the fact that people eventually want their beliefs to become the dominant ones in society, and think about the ramifications of deterministic belief played out in all spheres of society. What would be the consequences of this belief lived out? Just listen to their conclusions from Sam Harris's book.
But the point that he puts is that, take for instance people who commit domestic murders. If you murder someone that you know personally, in fact, the chances of you reoffending are actually incredibly low. It's likely that you'll never kill another person, and yet we still would feel as though that person deserved to be thrown behind bars.
Yes.
So even in cases where we know that a person isn't going to reoffend and no longer poses a threat, we still feel the need to either throw that person in prison or ruin their reputation. Do you feel that that's justified in any way? Because I certainly don't.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think it's justified. And to give another example, if you've got one person that accidentally runs over another person, and you've got one person that deliberately murders somebody, it's not two actions that are exactly the same. We recognise this even with the concepts of free will which people and our justice systems currently have. And you can tell what somebody or something is going to do, or what he or she is likely to do, depending on the intentions that they had. So if you know that this clump of atoms here is intentionally hurting people, and this clump of atoms accidentally is hurting people, you can tell that this one needs to be contained because it's deliberately acting to do this, whereas this one doesn't.
You can tell intentions? You can predict people so well that we can know or know that they will likely do this or that? Let me tell you something. Anyone who has spent any amount of time dealing with people, old or young, will tell you people are not so predictable. In fact, people are notoriously very much hallmarked by their unpredictability. Just when you think you've got them figured out, you realize quickly you have nothing figured out. People are not a set of dominoes.
It seems to be that you thought a lot about the results that this has, particularly on our justice system. Do you have any answers to it? Do you have ways in which you would say this ought to happen in light of these facts? Or...
Well, for me, it sounds almost cliche, but the answer is education. Because, for instance, put it this way, you fully accepted a moment ago that a man who kills somebody's family is not morally accountable. Do you feel sorry for that man?
Yes.
But do you really? I mean, if somebody killed your family, would you feel sorry for them?
If they killed my family, my emotions would overcome it.
You wouldn't be able to do it.
But if they killed someone else's family that I don't know, I can quite get around it.
But the only way that you can get around it is because you need to, if you sit and really think about the practical or the philosophical implications of saying that free will does not exist. Okay, so for me, if we are going to attempt to change anything about the criminal justice system, or even the way that we view criminals, we absolutely have to get everybody on the same plane. We have to convince everybody of the premise of this book. We have to put it into the school curriculum. We have to make everybody understand the philosophical grounding for the practical implications. If people aren't in agreement that free will doesn't exist, then any practical implications that we can come up with, if I say, okay, free will doesn't exist, therefore we need to stop holding people morally accountable. If you don't think free will doesn't exist, then there's nothing we can do about that, because
it seems
we
to be
couldn't
that needs to be the starting
so
point.
we'd have to absolutely. So for me, people often ask, this is the first thing people ask, they say, what are the practical implications? For me, that's not the most important thing at the moment. The most important thing now is to convince people of the premise.
No big deal, right? Educate people without any notion that people are morally responsible for anything? What's the worst that could happen? Why you always gotta be a buzzkill, Nathan? So we've already seen that played out in the last century. Thanks, history. You've always gotta bring us back to reality.
They can't have their religion and also think and also accept that free will does not exist as they've always defined it.
Yes.
So whether or not people will accept it, I'm not entirely sure. I almost think that you can't have religion, or you'd have to be in a state where religion doesn't exist before everybody accepts the facts, unfortunately, to put it this way, because it's not just an opinion, this is what the facts are showing.
I know religion too.
Made a good lyric to that John Lennon song. So let's imagine no religion. Yipes, I'm imagining a nightmare. No thanks, John Lennon. Your song made that sound so much better than reality did. So, we've seen states play that out in the last century also. Not so good. And once again, history comes in to ruin the day. History, you're the worst.
Exactly, and it brings us to the point that you don't need everybody to accept evolution in order for a society to function like it is true, to accept that it's true.
Yes,
you do need to get everybody to accept, or at least most people to accept, the justice as the way that we naturally feel it, retribution as we naturally predispose to feel, does not stand to reason.
Yes.
And if you do not convince them of that first, you're going to have people thinking that the justice system is delivering the wrong punishment or the wrong rehabilitative act, etc. So that is the big issue with it, and that's why you do actually have to convince most people of this before you can really do anything.
They know they need to convince everyone in order to implement this. And so they are out working hard continually to do this and make it happen, Captain. You got to respect, though, that they are following their beliefs fully and their conclusions passionately and being intellectually honest with where their conclusions lead and what they need to do to change things. That makes total sense. They're not saying one thing but doing another. They're honestly just following where their discoveries have led them. And I wish more people would live out what they say they believe and follow the conclusions. There's something really sincere in a life like that. Even though I think their discoveries aren't quite correct, at least they're out there trying to understand truth and following it wherever it may lead, whether they like it or not. What you believe matters and has consequences in real life, so choose wisely.